the School Board of Education meeting. Can I get a motion to open the meeting, please?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
At this point, the board will move into executive session for the purpose of collective negotiations under the Taylor Law, medical, financial, credit, or employment history of a particular person or corporation, or matters leading to the appointment or employment history of a particular person or corporation, or matters leading to the appointment or employment or promotion or demotion or discipline or suspension or removal of a particular person or corporation. Can I have a motion to move into exec, please? Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
For the public, we will be back for the public session at approximately 7 p.m. There is a tenure reception tonight at 6:30, so people will be back in time for that.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for a very special event. It's been a number of years in the making, but we are so excited and happy to welcome some of our staff who received tenure over the last 2+ years. So we have members of our class of 2020 and class of 21, because of course during the pandemic it was not advisable to either have in-person meetings or to have large gatherings like this. So we're excited that we're able to finally recognize a number of staff, many of which who are with us and others that couldn't make it tonight. But I'll turn it over to our MC, Dr. Margaret Weller, who will identify the staff that joined us and what tenure is and all of that good stuff.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members of the audience. It is my privilege this evening to help share a very exciting event in the life of any teacher. The achievement of tenure is a milestone not to be ignored. We all work diligently towards this confirmation of the work that we do, and that is what tenure is. It is a district saying, good job, we love you, we want you to stay with us and continue to grow. We make that commitment to you as professionals that are supporting your role, and we know that you make that commitment in return as well. All of this for the benefit of our children, because we're all working towards that same goal. So this evening, as Joe said, we have 2 years of catching up to do. And I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. If it pleases everyone, I have a long list here. I feel badly that a lot of people could not make it tonight, and I'd like to be able to read their names and recognize the fact that they received tenure, even though they couldn't be here to celebrate. So I'll give you their name and their job description, and then we will get to our folks who are here with us this evening. So Mallory Cotto, teaching assistant. Mary Gerio, teaching assistant. Lori Bartholomew, teaching assistant. Megan Brenner, school social worker. Joseph Bruno, physical education teacher. Maureen Chiboso, teaching assistant. Robert Curran, teaching assistant. Louisa DeChico, E&L teacher. Mary Beth DeGennaro, who was here and scooted out the door, high school librarian. Megan Dietz, teaching assistant. Jody Ferrari, special education teacher. Melissa Golio-Haran, special education. Eva Lupica, teaching assistant. Samantha McKay, world languages. Nicole McNally, special education. Lauren Morabito, music. Jennifer Ortiz, world language. Shirley Reith, science. Katrina Rocco, reading. Doreen Schwartz-Burns, teaching assistant. Kayla Shakatano, special education. Andrea Scott, teaching assistant. Nicole Salveggi Landry, teaching assistant. Gillian Azaro, teaching assistant. Christine Williams, teaching assistant. Victoria Ashley, teaching assistant. Nicole DiNardo, physical education. Christine Dinney, art. Christina Fields, special education. Ethan Fox, math. Lindsay Giacomantonio, oh no, Lindsay's here. Why are you on this list, Lindsay? I apologize. I was going to say, are there two of her? Asher Zink, social studies. Christine Zula, social studies. And 2 administrators, Anthony Giovanazzi, the assistant principal at the high school, and Lisa Shookman, executive director of pupil personnel services, who is here. Okay. Congratulations to all of you. Let's move on to the folks who are with us this evening. So unfortunately for all of you, this is the aerobic part of the meeting. I am going to call your name and you are going to come up and receive a small gift. So we're going to start with the teachers and teaching assistants at Buchanan Kerplank Elementary School. Please congratulate with us Janet Goodman, second grade teacher. Congratulations. Kristen Baker, grade 5. Debbie Larson, grade 4. Dorothy Curley, grade 5. And teaching assistant Robin Farrakane. Thank you, BB. Middle School, Joanne Vano, reading teacher, come on down. Okay, I'm going to turn the mic over to Mrs. Donna Teresi, who will read the FGL names.
Thank you so much, and I can't thank you enough for all the sparkle that you give my children every day. I love you deeply, and I look forward to some of you I'm going to get to work for the first time, and some that I've handed on to other buildings. So thank you, everybody, and congratulations. So from Frank G. Lindsay, we have Amy Cavalier. Okay. Diane Ellis. And Samantha Hess.
Thank you, Frank G. Lindsay.
And I have the honor of Furnace Woods. I have 2 special ed teachers that got tenure this year, Lindsay Giacomantonio. And Sarah Ambersacchia.
Thank you, Furnace Woods. Okay, last but not least, the high school. And we are proud to congratulate our ENL teacher, Deb Levy. Okay, so once again, congratulations. A little bit delayed, but that doesn't mean we're any less proud of all of you. Thank you for the wonderful work that you do each day. We know that I don't have to say keep up the good work because you will. And again, thank you for being here tonight. I know it was a little unexpected, but we're very happy to have you and host you. So have a great evening. See you tomorrow.
Good evening. Today is Wednesday, June 1st, and this is the Hendrick Hudson School Board of Education meeting. I'd like to start the meeting this evening with the Pledge of Allegiance and also a moment of silence for the many young lives that we've lost in recent time. Okay.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. Our first order of business is to approve the agenda as stated. Can I get a motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And before we do our consent agenda, we are going to recognize 3 very capable students, Kayla Cohen, Caitlin Keefe, and Leander Cook.
So I'd like to invite up Dr. Rogers, who will share a little bit about the science research program, which all 3 of these ladies are participants in, as well as the WESIF competition and something very exciting happening next week. So Dr. Rogers, please.
Yes. First of all, I want to show my gratitude to all the administrator, members of the board, and the administration at the high school, Mr. Mackey, Mr. Giovanazzi, and Mr. Nick, which I am very grateful for this program. It was very difficult to run it over the past 2 years because the students normally do their work in labs, and most campuses were closed because of the pandemic. And so the students here have accomplished, I think, a tour de force, which is to be able to run their project most of the time doing the work online, analyzing data or doing their own survey without being actually present physically in a lab, which is very difficult. Additionally, the students represented the science research program at Lanhud at the Winchester Science and Engineering Fair, which is called WESIF, that has about 500 to 600 students competing, and I think 28 schools from around this region. And they were recognized with the NOAA Award and an Honorable Mention Award. And that really means a lot because, you know, it's very difficult for a student to complete that type of project alone in front of a computer during the summer. That requires a lot of motivation. They don't have a teacher that pushes them, and they don't have the physical presence of being in a lab. For those who do not know, the science research program is a 3-year program starting at the sophomore year, where students engage in authentic and actual research working with scientists. And they very often go in a lab or not, or do computer projects. And this program is really teaching the student real life skills, which is how to work in a professional setting, how to communicate with scientists, how to present themselves, how to write a paper, how to speak, and so on. Those skills are very prized in college. And if you have a son or daughter in the upcoming freshman group or upcoming sophomore group, I would really encourage you to check this program. Next week, we're going to have a science research symposium. It will be in person and streaming online for those who cannot make it in person. The students will present the totality of their projects, 10 minutes talks each. And this is a really important thing because, you know, they've worked 3 years on that. So it's kind of important to be able to show fully what they have done. So I will invite you all to come, whether in person or online, to view the symposium. Starts at 7 p.m. Next week on Thursday, on Wednesday.
Thursday.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just Memorial Day confused. And yeah, right, everybody. And so also I will put out a newsletter with the papers that the students have written that will be posted on the website. And so I would encourage everybody to come and read what they have produced. That's quite outstanding. So I will give the podium to Kayla. Kayla Cohen is a junior. She participated to WESIF as a junior, and you therefore will see her again next year. And here we go.
Okay, thank you all for having me. My name is Kayla Cohen, and my project is analyzing treatment methods for canine behavioral disorders. So what are canine behavioral disorders and why are they important? So canine behavioral disorders are behaviors performed by a dog in response to a stimuli. And in my project, I decided to look at an array of behavioral disorders, but an example could include storm phobia, which a stimuli could be like a thunderclap or a strike of lightning, and that could cause a dog to emit a fear response, like shaking or hiding under a table. Another example could be like separation anxiety, where the stimuli could be a dog's attachment figure leaving the home, and that could cause the dog to participate in inappropriate elimination or destructiveness of that home. So evidently, these responses can lead to a disruption of daily life for both the owner and the dog, like owner frustration, injury to either the dog or the owner, and obviously this is negatively altering the beloved human-animal bond. So the treatment options that I decided to look at were behavioral modification, which is continuous behavioral therapy that is participated in by both the owner and the dog, in which they're hoping to condition a specific response. The next treatment method is behavioral modification with medication, which is that same behavioral therapy, but in conjunction with psychoactive medication, which is just altering the behavior in a more neurochemical aspect. And lastly is medication alone, which is just that psychoactive medication. So the importance of this research is that 85% of the dog population is actually affected by behavioral disorders, and 47% of owners can claim this reason as a reason to relinquish their dogs to a shelter. And 3.1 million dogs remain in shelters today. And unfortunately, 390,000 of those dogs are euthanized each year, with behavioral disorders being a major contribution to that, as it inhibits their ability to get adopted. So my goal of study was to achieve a retrospective understanding of the efficacy behind each treatment plan, providing owners with a guideline to give their dog the help they need. And to do this, I created a logic-divided survey that I sent directly to owners, in which they were asked to give the demographic information of their dog, which includes their age, their weight, their spay and neuter status, etc. And then they were asked to give their dog's treatment method, which then sent them to a specific section of the survey to have specific questions set to their experience. And in that section, the owners were asked to quantify their dog's improvement on a Likert scale from 1 to 5, 1 being there was no improvement, 5 being their behavior was completely diminished. And if the owners had their dog participated in a treatment plan with medication, they were asked if adverse effects were included to have that safety component of the guideline. And from there, my survey, the implications that I found, were that the treatment methods that include behavioral modification would supply the most safe and effective results. And further with that guideline, the drug type and the presence of adverse effects did not show any significance. So continuing with that idea of medication, it did seem to diminish the improvement of the dog's behavior as compared to behavioral modification alone, but it is important to note that some dogs may need the presence of a drug, as it can lower the intensity so then they can participate in that behavioral modification plan. But it still does question the effectiveness of medication, and it also questions the owner's perspective on medication, as they may not be as diligent to participate in their dog's behavioral modification if the drug is included. Sorry, just go back. Back to that slide. Sorry. Thank you. So for my discussion, it is important to note that my means of data collection were from owners' opinions, so they had to recollect their dog's behavior from the past, and also they could have had valence towards or against their treatment plan, meaning there could have been some bias. But it is important to note that the owner's opinion is important to include in this type of research, as they are the ones who are relinquishing their dogs to a shelter. And to that, I believe that other options for medication should be further analyzed and studied, as it does include a lot of minimal effort from the owner, which could hopefully diminish the likelihood of abandonment of those dogs. There's my works cited, and then as you can see, the two dogs there are my dogs Eddie and Sarge, and they did inspire this research as they both suffer from behavioral disorders. So I'd like to thank them as well. But I want to thank Dr. Rogers, Dr. Pablo Abraham, my peers, my family for being so supportive and helpful throughout this project.
I will introduce Kerplank Keith. Kerplank Keith is a senior and presented at West End and got the NOAA Award. She was in the environmental sciences.
Hello, everyone. I'm moving to a topic that's definitely less enjoyable than dogs. It's titled The Implementation of Dynamic Tick Population Models in New York, and I'm Kim. Next slide, please. Okay, my hands keep tapping. Okay, so ticks, stop me, perfect, thank you. So ticks have 4 main life stages, which are egg, larvae, nymph, and adult. And with these 4 stages, they see 3 main activity levels, which are questing, feeding, and engorging. So questing is when they're actually looking for a host, feeding is when they're taking the blood, and then engorging is when they finish taking the blood, they drop off, and then that cycle repeats. Okay, so here we're seeing the different peak times of the tick populations. Okay, we're seeing that, if you click it, please. So adults have 2 annual peaks in the spring and in the fall, and then nymphs and larvae have 1 peak, which is in the summer. I'm so sorry for all these errors, just keep clicking. Perfect. Okay, and this shows the Lyme disease cases from 2000 to 2018, and we're generally seeing an increasing trend in these cases, so it kind of shows the prevalence of this issue. So the DoD provided my data for this project, so I'm specifically comparing upstate and downstate New York. So for downstate, I'm looking at our close by Fort of West Point, and then for upstate, I'm looking at Fort Drum. So my objective was 2 objectives. 1, to model the trends of tick population models with past data and current data. And then the second one was to look at the future and see what's going to happen with these tick information. And so my job of research was data is constantly being released, so we really need to see what's going to happen when it's changing. And the purpose was that the factors are contributing to this growth and this rise. So my hypothesis was that as the temperatures increase, we're going to see an increase in those Lyme disease cases. So this is showing what I'm looking at with my data. So I'm basically comparing precipitation and temperature with the tick data. So this is showing the general increase in temperature, and I'm specifically looking at the years 2040 to 2060. And so I'm going to be increasing my temperatures by 1 to 2 degrees Celsius throughout this project. Okay, so this is objective 1 of the historical data. So as you can see on the left, you're seeing Fort Drum, which is upstate New York, and the right is West Point. And there's a significantly increase in the tick population model, or the tick population in downstate New York compared to upstate. And we're also seeing that the time in which we see those populations is earlier than in downstate than upstate. You're supposed to see this, right? So those are all the weeks there. Okay, this is another information of a 3-year period specifically. So you're seeing a longer time period, and we're still seeing that these populations are much less in upstate New York than downstate. And we're also seeing that those peak periods are earlier in downstate than compared to upstate. And those are those weeks. Okay, and this is showing specifically questing ticks. And so we're seeing those weeks, and we're seeing again that these ticks are showing less in upstate than downstate, and that week period difference. So now we're going to move to objective number 2. So what's going to happen when we change this data? So this graph shows what's happening when we're going from 0.5 to 2 degrees Celsius. Now we're seeing that there's an increase in those tick populations when we're increasing the temperature. Okay, and this is showing specifically West Point with our RCode database, which I use to analyze the data. So we're seeing that with the circles that will eventually come up, that the population is increasing with temperature. And this is looking specifically at Fort Drum, And we're seeing that not only are the populations increasing, but we're seeing that there's a longer time period of these increases, which means there's more time for you to get exposed to Lyme disease. Okay, and now what can we take from this? So in general, temperature increases will mean an increase in tick populations, and that future modeling is vital, so we need to continue with this research to see what's actually going to happen. And that climate change is not set in stone, so we need to really continue this, and implementation models should be put in place to prevent outbreak, which is what I'm predicting with my information. And I would like to thank my mentor, teacher, family, and obviously the Department of Defense for allowing me to use their data. Thank you.
So I am introducing next Leandra Quick, who worked with Dr. Canfield in Presbyterian Hospital.
I'm Leandra Quick, and my title is Linkage Between Allergies and Anxieties. So, over 50% of the U.S. population struggles with allergies, and an allergy is a hypersensitivity in the immune system. So what happens is the immune system will be exposed to an allergen, which is a harmless protein, and it will recognize it as an invader. The reaction to this is an overproduction of IgE. The IgE and the allergen will interact with one another, releasing histamines, which causes the allergic reaction. So the gap in knowledge for allergies is what causes the allergic reaction, so why does the immune system recognize the allergen as an invader? Anxiety is the most common mental disorder, and it is a reaction towards stress. So symptoms for allergies is sneezing, itchy eyes, hives, and anaphylaxis, which is a severe allergic reaction. Then symptoms for anxiety is fear, trembling, and short concentration. Symptoms that they share is having a tight throat, increased heart rate, trouble breathing, increased blood pressure, sweating, fatigue, and nausea. As you can tell, they have a lot of similar symptoms. So the similarity between these symptoms may be due to the fact that allergies release histamines and anxieties can release histamines. And then the similarity between these symptoms can also lead to misinterpretation when trying to identify which reaction is occurring in the moment. So the goal of my study was to help gain insight into the roles of anxieties on the perception and manifestation of allergies to develop better treatment strategies. Then the hypothesis that I developed with my mentor was that anxieties are modifying factors that increase the severity of what's perceived as an allergic reaction, and then that anxieties by themselves can trigger what's perceived as an allergic reaction. Thank you. So I conducted a survey using Google Forms, and all ages were accepted, but anyone under the age of 18 needed guardian permission, or the guardian could answer on behalf of the child. The range of ages was 7 years old to 69 years old. So I received the school IRB approval, and on the survey itself, there was an informed consent form for safety purposes. Then to gain participants, I contacted multiple Facebook groups, and I emailed individuals that I knew would probably be interested in partaking. So in a total, I had 65 participants, 39 female and 26 male. For the analysis, I used a Likert scale, so either from 1 to 5 or 1 to 3. And I also used a chi-square distribution test, so this was based off a 2x2 table. So it was basically comparing two different questions to find a certain outcome. And for something to be significant, there had to be a value of less than 0.05. So some basic data on the participants was that 47 out of the 65 have allergies, 12 out of the 65 have been diagnosed with anxiety, and 18 out of those 65 have had a previous panic attack. And all of these 18 participants have experienced a previous allergic reaction. Okay, so going right into the results. So anxieties are not the sole contributing factor in triggering the perception of allergic reactions. So anxieties can worsen the perception of the symptoms that are associated with immunological dysfunction that results in the clinical manifestation of allergies. So for future direction, if this study continues. So originally, me and my mentor had wanted to conduct a focus group. So this contains a small population of participants and raise specified questions, but there's not much data on this topic, so we weren't sure what questions we should focus on. So this survey was used as a pilot study. So now that we have collected this data, we know that the questions would focus on specific worries of the participants regarding their allergy. Then also at the end of the survey, there was a small comment section where participants could leave their concerns or stuff they want to share about the condition. But as I had mentioned, anyone under 18, the guardian, they need guardian permission, or the guardian could answer on behalf of them. So in this comment section, there was a trend with the guardians showing that not only was the child anxious about their allergy condition, but the parent themselves was anxious about their child's allergy condition. So I think it would be interesting to see how the child's allergy condition impacts the guardian's stress and anxiety levels, and also see how the guardian's handle on the child's allergy condition impacts the child's allergy condition overall. So then for our future treatment, a holistic approach, so clinical and mental, so involving a team of multidisciplinary healthcare professionals. So this means basically if you go to an allergist and you're concerned about how to handle your allergy condition, at the same clinic there is, at the same clinic there's a psychologist or a psychiatrist that is also educated on allergies. So you can refer to this person, they can tell you, they can inform you how to cope with your allergy, if an allergic reaction occurs, how to calm down, and just take a breather. Next. So I would like to thank my mentor, Dr. Canfield, my science research teacher, Dr. Rogers, my peers, and family for their support. And thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, Stephen?
No, I didn't have a question. I just wanted to say thank you. Those were 3 very interesting studies. Tics are very much a part of a dog's life, so those 2 are very much related, and anxiety is also related to behavioral disorders, so it's nice how they all tie together.
Thank you so much for having us, and we're grateful, and do not forget our symposium next week.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, does anybody have anything to pull from our consent agenda this evening? All right, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda, please? Can I get a second? All in favor? Aye. So there were a couple of items previously removed, from the consent agenda, and they are donations. Always a happy event. Our first donation is a donation for $125 for the Barbara Katzenstein Scholarship Fund. The Office of Special Education has received its donation to be utilized to pay for partial summer camp funding for students with significant handicapping conditions. Thank you very much for that donation. We've been getting repeated donations of this type over the past few months, and it's greatly appreciated. Our next donation is a rather unique one. It's the donation for a new drum kit for Blue Mountain Middle School. The district received a donation in the amount of $1,643 from the Blue Mountain Middle School PTA for a new drum kit for the jazz club and the band students in the Blue Mountain Middle School. That's an excellent addition to the band, and perhaps Mr. Hochreiter will be able to join them and play some jazz drums at some point with the new set. Thank you very much to the middle school PTA for that donation as well. Can I get a motion to approve these 2 donations? Can I get a second? All in favor? Aye. Thank you. And that will bring us to our superintendent's report. We do not have the drum set here, so we will not be hearing drums this evening.
Yes, we'll be with words and not drums. We're going to turn it over to our team first. I know Enrique is going to present, so we'll save his commentary for the presentation, but I'll turn it over to Margaret or Lisa for any updates, and then I'll wrap up.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'll start with my usual PSAs. So, kindergarten parents, alert, alert. Please get your children registered. We look forward to welcoming them to their place at Frank G. Lindsay next year. So if you haven't done that, the website is the place to go. Click on the kindergarten registration link, and you should have all your questions answered. And if not, please don't hesitate to call district office. Likewise, pre-K parents out there, the deadline is tomorrow. By end of day tomorrow, we need your applications. The lottery will be pulled Friday morning, And we will let our families know, hopefully by Monday noon, where you are in that process. For those of you who have been receiving, I don't know what that is that me? Like, is it real?
You can hold it a little bit further.
Oh, okay, thank you. I'm sorry for that. For those of you who had applied previously, you probably have received emails from me. Please respond to those emails and let me know what your preference is. We do have a likely collaborator. Our attorney today sent the contract to their attorney. So that should be moving forward. I think that's all I have on the pre-K update. We are moving forward with our curriculum selection. Our teachers have been very busy visiting local preschools and talking with established programs about some of the questions that we've had as a group. Dr. Kramer is busy working with those teachers to order tables and chairs and furniture and all sorts of fun things to play with, etc. So we are very excited that that is continuing to move along. That is my update for K and pre-K. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
How many kindergarten registrations do you have at this
What
time?
are we up to, Jane? Like 112?
118.
118, thank you.
Closer to the number you had anticipated,
Closer,
right?
yes. I don't know if, what was that game show that you couldn't go over the number of the person
Yeah.
closest to without going a whole bunch? So we'll see how accurate I was in my guessing. And just for the record, as of 4:30 this evening, we had 62 parents with applications for the UPA program. So keep in mind that we have 54 seats so far and 62 applicants. So we'll see where we are by the end of the day tomorrow, if we have any more than that. Okay. All right, passing it to Lisa.
Where do I hear, Greg? Is that better? All right. So we have a lot to talk about with PPS. As you know, we oversee a lot in our department. One of the exciting things is a school-based mental health grant that we have worked with student assistants. And it'll be an outside company that comes in 2 days a week in one of our either middle school or high school. And we are working in conjunction with Fox Lane High School. So we'll be sharing. We asked for a psychiatrist, but we probably won't get it, but because they are very difficult to get no matter what we do. So it'll be a social worker or psychologist that will come in. We'll work with our kids that can't access outside clinicians because it's so difficult right now to get into any clinician outside of a school day. So we have our staff, but if kids need further and more in depth, then we can refer them to this in-house mental health clinic. Would I love to have it 5 days a week? I would. Would I love to have it K-12? I would. But I don't think we are going that far yet, but hopefully we can get there. So that's an exciting thing that we just found out about probably 2 weeks ago, I think, Joe. And we found out that we're working with Fox Lane recently, as of yesterday. And I'll be working with Ellen and the Office of Mental Health to make sure we have the right space, that we have an office and whatever else they need within the building. So that's exciting news. We are expanding our SEL programs K-5 as in preparation for Princeton plan. So we have a lot of our social workers, school counselors going for further extension in any training of DBT into second step and zones of regulation. Executive functioning, we are up and running again, which is exciting. We have a new social worker and a new school counselor coming on board that have already been hired. They were hired in the last couple weeks. They're actually joining some of our PD already. They're employed by other schools, but after school activities, they've been joining with us. So they're really going to be in the know when it comes time for transition in July, which is very exciting to us. So we already have them on board, and they already have some of this training, but it goes a little bit more in depth. We are currently working with the middle school and high school. We now have our projections. We are ahead of schedule. We are done with CSEs mostly. There's some makeups right now, which is very exciting when it's only June 1st. So we do have a few makeups and a few meetings that had to be changed last week. But we're getting ready to work with the buildings for scheduling for the fall, which is exciting. I would love to have that done before we leave school so everybody knows where they're going to be, what they're teaching, but it'll all depend on what's happening with the building principals, if we can get in and they're ready to schedule us and work with us. think that's about all we have. Any questions? And we're working on, Lauren and I are meeting tomorrow, our new middle school principal. We're going to start talking about SEL curriculum 6-8. So that's very exciting. So I know my psychologists are ready to jump on it. And social workers, they want to do it this year. And I said, let's slow down a little. We're going to have somebody new next year. And we want to make sure that everybody has a say in it. And then we'll figure it out. So we're going to meet tomorrow to discuss that. And then hopefully in the next couple weeks, bring in our mental health team and our school counselors and have another group meeting. And then explore some programs.
Maybe I can say, but what age group is, you said that for the grant program, you couldn't do it K-12, so who is this targeting
Right now, we're going to target the middle school because our one counselor that we have through student assistance is only there part-time. Where at the high school, we have a full-time person. So it'll be in the middle school 6 to 8.
And how are students referred to it? Is it through families, through teachers?
Yes. So families can refer, they can say we need help. Our school counselors can refer, the school can refer, our social workers directly can refer. If you think about it, and I would say out of 10 kids that we want to get extra help outside of school, that's a little bit deeper, they need more than what we can get them, you will probably get, if we're lucky, 40% of them into an outside therapist. That's how hard it is to get into therapy right now. I'm working with Westchester Ties, I'm working with Cross County. It's very difficult when we say to them, we need a worker in this home for this whole family. They're like, we can't find anybody. So the mental health need is huge. If you as a parent have a child with a mental health disorder or any kind of anxiety, like they were talking about here, you know that it's very difficult to get in anywhere. So if we can get 40% in by us pushing really, really hard and using our contacts, then the other 60% can be helped by this person that comes in from the outside.
And how long will the grant money run for?
Well, we don't know that. We're hoping it's multi-year, and I'm hoping we can expand. And if we can't expand, then maybe it's a conversation of applying for more grants. In a district that I came from, we had a full mental health suite, 5 days a week. We had somebody there. We had a doctor on staff through one of the health clinics that would come in, and our kids would get their medical care. They could have dental. We had dental there as well. So eventually, hopefully looking down the line, it was one person that we shared in 5 buildings, very similar to the size of Penn High. And we have to think about that and get creative with funding.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
Thank you both.
Okay, and I'll wrap up this portion by sadly talking about an unfathomable incident that took place in elementary school in Texas. Earlier today, around noon, I sent an email to our community, over 4,500 recipients, talking about what our school district has done and will continue to do to ensure student safety. It's important to underscore that schools have been put in a position to make school safety its core competency when I don't think in all of my training, and I'm going to speak for Enrique, Margaret, and Lisa, we very seldom had training in school safety when we were learning to become teachers or counselors or business officials. But the climate today is such where this is what schools do, this is what school boards do, and we're sitting in a room that went through some significant improvements over the last number of years to make sure that families felt safer sending their kids to school and that students felt safer in a space exactly like this. We rely on the help of law enforcement. Our SRO Jesse is here with us. The school board back in 2018 began a multi-year agreement with the Westchester County Police for a school resource officer in the district. That was on the heels at that time of Parkland, and that was after a pretty good long time of calmness in terms of school safety. But we responded, like many districts did, with a number of initiatives. One was a school resource officer. Another, perhaps most notably, was an $18.5 million capital project. And I know that not everyone has been able to get into their child's school over the last number of years, but I can assure you that when the time comes that you can re-enter any number of our 5 schools, your experience getting into that school is going to be much different because it's going to have a much more significant safety focus. It's also going to be very, very inconvenient. This board previous boards, when members of this board made the decision to make a significant investment not only in infrastructure but also technology improvements with safety in mind, where we have software and hardware that will scan any visitor into the school, parent, contractor, you name it, to make sure that they should be allowed to be in our school building with our most precious asset, which are our students. So while we have had a really interesting 2+ years in the pandemic, where windows are open, doors are open, children were encouraged to be outside, it's hard to think of what our environment was like before that. Single point of entry, very limited outside opportunities, making sure that there were safety sweeps and safety checks either by our security personnel or by our SRO, current and former. So we know that the pandemic loosened our focus on school safety from a health standpoint. Those were the recommendations by health departments, not by school boards or superintendents. But school safety, by and large, is not the core competency of folks that get involved in public education. And we rely on the specialists of law enforcement, we rely on BOCES, we rely on some of our safety consultants from Alteris. And I mentioned in the email who they were and how long they've been working with us and what they do. They are the group that goes an inch wide and a mile deep. They're the ones who come in to make sure we're focused on school safety, in addition to all of the other items that take place in public schools today. You heard Margaret and Lisa talk a little bit about them. But we rely on them to conduct training, we rely on them to advise us in best practice, we rely on them to go very, very deep with research and development on what schools can be doing or should be doing in terms of safety practices. We work with them to review our school-specific safety plans and our district safety plans, and to train folks and to run tabletop drills and to debrief after a drill or to debrief after a legitimate incident. Those debriefs include an opportunity to identify what we did well and then identify opportunities for continuous improvement. And we are in the education business, and we are always trying to improve. With the incident that took place in Texas, we still really don't know what happened. Information keeps coming out. It now appears particular law enforcement agencies have decided they're not going to comply with investigations as to what happened. And so it's really, really hard to get credible information on what did happen, what didn't happen, what went well, and what didn't. But for our safety consultants, and they work with dozens of districts in our region, they've been providing almost a daily update on what they've learned, and they're going to be providing training for our school leaders and their school safety teams to learn a little bit more about what went wrong in Texas and what we can do to prepare to make sure that never happens in Hendrick Hudson. So I'm not going to spend this time reciting the email I sent. I hope people take a minute to review that. But there are a lot of things that happen in terms of school safety that we can't discuss for that reason, that safety practices are a strategy. We don't publicize them, we don't make them available, and that is a very specific and significant confidential document. What oftentimes frustrates us is the information control. We had an incident at the high school, a very disturbing incident a number of years ago, where law enforcement came in and basically took over, as they always do. When you have a school incident, law enforcement takes over the entire operation, from communication to decision-making to strategy. The school personnel, whether you're the principal or superintendent or custodian, you are a bystander. You are watching a command. You are watching law enforcement run an incident command in your school. And information control is really, really difficult with cell phones and social media and all sorts of things. It's easy for information to get out of a confidential situation. And we have typically had those. The incident I'm referring to at the high school was really spooky and very significant. But we couldn't control the information. And what happened was children were reaching out to parents or loved ones or posting things on social media, as were children that were impacted at Parkland in Florida back in 2018. So while we go through rigorous training and we spend significant resources on trying to do better and do different and make investments in infrastructure and technology, it's the human behavior that we have to rely on, and that's really the point of the training, is trying to condition us to respond differently, to condition us to not have knee-jerk reactions or respond in a particular way. That's why law enforcement folks are really, really good at their job. They're stoic, they're firm, they're decisive, and they have to be. In education, we're in a business more around people and empathy and trying to communicate with folks and trying to understand successes and opportunities for improvement, and it's really, really hard for school people to switch that part of their brain on. As Dr. Abraham mentioned earlier, our school community also went through a tragic incident last week, and in similar fashion, the school district does not control information at that time. We were advised what we could say and what we couldn't, when we could say it, how we could say it, the level of detail, and we have to respect that. We have to respect when law enforcement advises us what to communicate and when we can, and we have to respect the fact when they tell us to absolutely not communicate anything. We will do a debrief of that incident. That debrief is in terms of the school and the district's response is taking place on Friday, and eventually all 5 of our schools will go through a similar debrief after we have some more credible information on what took place in Texas. So, by design, I guess what I'm trying to say is by design, not all of our strategies are public, and they're not public for a very specific reason. The school board approves a district safety plan. It's a very vanilla document. But it outlines some strategies, it outlines communication protocols, it outlines chain of command to make sure that there is a working understanding of who does what and when. School safety plans are not public. That is really where the rubber hits the road in terms of what do we do if, where do we go if this happens, how do we communicate something if a particular matter is presented to us. So while we can't always be transparent with everything, there has to be a high level of trust that folks inside the organization have been advised and have been trained. And sadly, fortunately, but sadly, that is a significant amount of what we do in our school district. It's sad that we have to say that. Perhaps we weren't school boards and school administrators and parents weren't having this conversation 25 or 30 years ago, but it's a different era now. I don't think this community thought 15 years ago that we would be investing literally millions of dollars in our infrastructure and technology in terms of student safety. But we are in a different era, and that's what we need to do, and thankfully we had the support of our community back then in the spring of 2018 to do that. So as we await some more credible information of what happened in Texas, we'll continue our training, we'll continue working with our consultants. School teams will come together again this summer to review their school safety plans, to make sure everyone understands what to do in particular situations. We do that every year, but we also know that we have some transition happening in terms of personnel before we open school in September. But that has always been part of our summer regimen, and it will remain. But once we have some more credible information about what went right and what didn't go so right in Texas, that will be part of that training as well. And we'll be able to report back on that at a later date. But wanted to put some meat on the bones in terms of the email we sent out. And if you have any questions around whether your children, whether you feel safe in school or so on and so forth, we always recommend reach out to your child's counselor or social worker, but also school principal. We do a series of lockdown drills. We do a series of fire drills. We're trying to create muscle memory. Usually we talk about muscle memory when we're practicing instruments or writing or we're playing a sport, but we are trying to infuse muscle memory in terms of how we respond to safety incidents. It's just where we are, and we have to embrace that and move forward. But I wanted to make sure I talked a little bit in more breadth and depth about the email that went out a little earlier today. With that, I'll open up for questions.
One thing that I know that is on a lot of people's minds, Joe, is the idea of perhaps adding an extra SRO to our district. I was wondering if you could talk with us through like how that would happen and what we need to consider with it, the costs.
Yeah, it was after Parkland that the board at that time in 2018 wished to revisit school resource officer Andrew Cutson. Andrew Cutson had a school resource officer for a while. A significant part of that was grant funded, as was many districts had grant funding to support a school resource officer, and those funds dried up around 2010, 2011, and with that went a lot of school resource officers. In 2018, the board at that time wanted to make sure that we had a presence, and we did that. We partnered with Westchester County, and that was a 5-year arrangement. Next year is the 5th year of that 5-year arrangement. If we were to entertain an additional school resource officer, we have heard from some families about maybe positioning one on the northern end of our district that would predominantly service the middle school in Furnace Woods. That's a conversation we've begun with the county, and that would be a contract that the board would approve, and I would anticipate that would be another multi-year agreement just to make sure that the county can provide ample staffing and support, and also so you don't have a revolving door. We're really lucky. We're one of the few districts that in the last 5 years has had very little turnover. Jesse, our current SRO, is only the second that we've had, and he's transitioned quite well over the last year, and that's why he's here today to sort of meet folks and also give a presence of safety and security. To answer your question again a little more directly, we are speaking with the county to see what that cost would be. It's in the neighborhood of $165,000 to $170,000.
With the significant staffing changes due to Princeton Plan, how are we ensuring that there's enough professional development plan that all of the staff that are new to each building feel completely confident with the building level safety plans?
Yeah, so the building level safety plans are facility specific in terms of access to outside doors, bus loops, those sort of things. So all of our elementary principals, and we'll add Lauren Scollins going to the middle school, will all be trained by Alteris in the school specific plan. So the safety plan doesn't change based on who the principal is or who the team is. It changes based on the functionality of the building or any changes to the footprint. So all of our administrators will go through their annual training for their building safety team, for their building safety plan, and then their CERT teams and their safety teams will also go through the training throughout the summer. School plans will then be communicated to staff when they return, to all staff when they return in October, and then we'll start drilling. Your children, I'm sure, come home and say we had a fire drill or a lockdown drill or so on and so forth. We try to not announce those things so that we can have some real-time experience and some real-time feedback. That also sometimes backfires because when you have an abrupt announcement to engage in a lockout drill or lockdown drill or you name it, without preempting that, it can create some anxiety, and as I mentioned earlier, students will contact families and families contact schools. But all of that training will continue to happen as it always has, even though we have some new people in all the schools. That will be one of the focus areas of the summer.
Thank you.
Have the CERT teams been decided for each of the schools?
Not yet. I think one of the priorities from the principals are to see what staff are moving to the new elementary schools that are part of a CERT team in the former school. So if I worked at Furnace Woods and now I'm going to BV, do I still want to be in the BV CERT team? You know, a lot of that we want to make sure we capture a lot of that training. It's about how to respond, again, going back to muscle memory, how we respond to incidents. The difference is going to be knowing the blueprint of the building and where to go, or if we're exiting or we're vacating the building, this wing goes out this door instead of that door. So we feel confident that we'll be able to train people on where to go and how to get there. It again just goes back to the muscle memory of what to do. On our ID badges, many of us have on the back the safety protocols. And on mine, we have the safety protocols. So what is a lockout? What do you do in a lockdown? What do you do in a lockout? How do you evacuate the building safely for a fire drill? What is a hold in place and what is a shelter in place? So, these are some additional strategies and communication campaigns that we've learned from best practices in other districts, and we'll continue to do that.
So are we prepared that if we need additional training because of the transitions, we're prepared to
Sure, yeah, and that will be that's why we don't do this work. We have the consultants that do that, so they'll work with each of the principals and the safety teams, and they'll come to me or Enrique or Anthony and say, look, we need some more time. We need we need to bring people in over the summer or pay for the safety team to stay after school to go a little bit wider, go a little bit deeper. Absolutely.
Alexis was next.
That's okay. Go ahead. You have a mic in hand.
One of the things we've been talking about a long time is cell phone signal at our schools, right? And I know that phones, like any phone built within the past 4 years, has Wi-Fi calling on it. And I know we have Wi-Fi at all the schools. That was part of the capital project, and we've done a lot there. But cell phone signal is also, it's another backup method for folks to communicate with their kids in the event of an emergency. So can you just give us an update of what's going on with the cell phone and some of the history around it?
Yeah, so there have been a couple inquiries from various developers over the last 8 years about either purchasing or leasing district property to put up a cell phone. And it's a third party that would come in and put it up and then sell the signal to the major carriers, however that business model works. We got pretty close with a couple developers where they were on site, and what they realized was that given the topography, or I should say the footprint of the middle school and Furnace Woods, that they wouldn't meet the requisite demands for a cell phone tower to go up, either access there or clearance or even residential code, oddly enough. So while we were excited that maybe we'd be able to partner with a couple developers, those plans didn't go anywhere. This Friday, we're meeting with the town of Cortland and representatives from Westchester County, basically to say this isn't just a school problem. I happen to live out there by the middle school, and I have a repeater or a booster. A lot of other people I know do. And you cannot get on the phone. I cannot get on the phone leaving my driveway and carry on a conversation for about 5 minutes until either I'm on Hudson Avenue in Peekskill or I'm well past the shooting range on Watch Hill. So we're trying to employ the town and the county because they have more resources to get this done. Whether I'm not forecasting or foreshadowing, but whether it's eminent domain or the county owns the shooting range, there's a lot of vacant property there. But we need to partner with. We need to make this not a school issue, right? This is bigger than just not having a cell phone signal, in an old school brick and mortar building. That sort of development is good for that entire community, and it's got to be an endeavor that's beyond us. So that conversation starts Friday.
So one of the things, thank you for that, by the way. One of the things you mentioned was a repeater. So, there are options for DAS, right? You can get a digital antenna service for a building that effectively works over the internet but gives you cell phone signal throughout the facility. Is that something that's been discussed also?
Yeah, we've discussed that with our technology director, and I know she's discussing it with her regional partners. One of her first responses was, that's a great mitigation strategy, but without power, that doesn't help. But it certainly will boost your signal, in the case of emergency when you're on the campus, and that is something we're investigating.
I was just curious for the annual trainings with Alteris and, for somebody like a new administrator in the middle school, are those trainings in person or is it virtual? Is it recorded?
Those are in person. That's you walk the building, you walk the building with your blueprint. I'll mention the Westchester County again. They spent considerable time over the last number of years with our blueprints and creating different zones for law enforcement. Where if Jesse has to call for backup, they not only have a map, but it's color coded. They know what safety zones there are, particularly like at the high school, where now we can block off or barricade certain parts of the building for safety reasons. All of that has to be done. That you've got to walk the building to get that appreciation. Now, some of the training or debriefs may be on Zoom. I know that over the last couple of years, some of them had, but in terms of we'll use Lauren Scallons, for example. She'll be spending a lot of time with Alteris walking that school to get familiar.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I know you and I and some of the members of the board here have spent a considerable amount of time on our tenure on the board discussing school safety, sadly. And thank you for your attention to that matter. No other questions on this? Did you have any other updates for us? All right, so that will bring us to our presentation on the Capital Reserve Fund proposal. If you want to read that.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. For the last probably 6 to 7 months, we've been discussing how to operate some of our facilities. One of the discussions was that Anton has $100,000 a year to patch all the repairs that we need to do during the year in our 7 buildings. That it sounds like a lot of money, but really, given the size of our buildings, it's not a lot of money. So in Facilities Committee, we started discussing what else can we do. I mentioned the repair reserve. And I'm going to give you a look at the repair reserve. And maybe after I finish, we can discuss what does the board want to do regarding the repair reserve. So let's start with what is the repair reserve. The repair reserve is only for repairs. We cannot use it to buy equipment. We cannot use it for regular maintenance services. So, for example, if I need to maintain the boiler and it costs me $10,000 a year to tune it up, that's not a repair. I cannot use my repair reserve for that. In order to increase or decrease the reserve, we don't need community voting. It can be approved by the Board of Education. The only thing we need to do is to do a hearing for the community on how we're planning to spend the money. Usually we do it prior to a Board of Education, and there's some scheduling that we have to do. We have to put it in the papers. We need to leave a couple of weeks for people to be able to come to the hearing if they want to hear about the reserve and how we're planning to use the funds. A little bit of history about our own repair reserve. It was opened in the late 1980s. There was not a lot of money until the 17-18 school year when we had a very good year and we decided to put $2.2 million into the reserve. And the last withdrawal that we did from the reserve was the same year where we spent $295,000 for paving district-wide. The balance today is $1,954,000. And if you do the math, obviously the difference between those two numbers is interest income. So the math is correct. So, after several discussions with the facilities committee, we asked Anthony to give us a proposed repair reserve projects for this summer for around $100,000. And Anthony came with the following projects: work on the roof facade work in the middle school, in BV, repave the walkway to Westchester Avenue, and some front sidewalk repair. In Franchilinci, do some window panel repair. That would be $100,000, actually $102,000. But the discussion is, should we use more? If the Board of Education decides to use more of the repair reserve funds, we would do paving and catch basin repairs in the high school, brick repointing in front of the building, roof repairs, and in the middle school, sidewalk and catch basin repairs and boiler repairs. And finally, in Franchilinci, we do cut and seal backlog, and in the bus garage, we do also some of the pavings. So that's basically the repair reserve. That was the discussion that we had yesterday with the facilities committee. You need to make two decisions. Maybe the first decision is if you are interested in using the repair reserve, so we can do some of the work this summer. And if it's yes, then the next decision that you have to make is the amount of money that you want to spend. The interesting thing is that if you make a decision today, tomorrow we can contact the newspaper, we can start the process, or probably if we have time in our next Board of Education meeting in 2 weeks, we can approve it, and we can start working on the projects as soon as the following day. Yes?
Here's a quick question. In the list of all the things to do, the one thing I didn't see was the high school parking lot. Every morning I'm dodging potholes. I don't know if anybody else has the same experience.
To tell you the truth, I didn't go and look around with Anthony. This was Anthony's list. I'll discuss it with him.
Well, if we could, I think we've heard a lot from the community on repairs needed to the different schools. I think it would be great to get some of that feedback and then maybe do a priority list, right? And then do a risk assessment and a priority list of all the feedback we get, because people are going to ask for things that, it would be nice to fix, but it's not a high priority for us, right?
Sure.
But I'm sure there are things that maybe Anthony's not thinking of that parents who go to the schools every day, me for one, right, going to the high school every day, there are things that I see that maybe he doesn't catch.
No, I totally agree with you. The reason why we decided on these projects is because everything started probably in March when Jennifer said, I would like to put more money into the budget for repairs. We were basically done with the budget, but I mentioned about the repair reserve. And then we asked Anthony to do all the priorities. We came up with the idea, okay, let's do $100,000. The problem of getting a lot more, of going to the community, is that will take time, and this is for this summer that we're basically on. Again, if the board decides, well, we can spend $300,000, so obviously maybe we can do it, in a long weekend. Yeah. So in that sense, it's not a problem. But what if it's roof repair that will take 6 months or 2 months. We can only do it during the summer. So the idea was, let's see if the board is interested in doing the first $100,000. That was the idea. And based on that, then maybe the board wants to do more. And then maybe we already are at the point where we are going to hire in the next month our architects that will do the audit. And then I would prefer to wait another 3 to 4 months to see what the architects tell us is in big need for repair, and then come back to the board and say that the architects believe that we need another $500,000 in repairs, and that might be part of that.
Yeah, I think there will be
Well,
two
I
things,
agree with you.
right? There are going to be things that the parents see every day, and then there are going to be things that the architects notice that parents might not notice unless you're, right? So my one question, sorry, one follow-up question is, when we put out the notice, do we have to have all the projects already defined when we approve this?
Yes.
Or are we approving a dollar value and then we can allocate it as we need to?
We can be broad in saying paving, just to say in say paving, and then we decide if it's more important the paving in the high school than the paving in BV. But we need, it's like a capital project. You cannot just say, approve $100,000 worth of education and let me decide where I want. They have to be specific projects that can be broad, but definitely it has to be set.
No, thank you. I mean, I would like to just make sure that we involve the parents and other people in the district going forward.
No question about it, I agree. But
could I add?
I think this is just $100,000 and it's like not a lot of money that we need, and it's Anthony's job to tell us what is it we're working it is that the biggest problems are.
And if I could add, the facilities committee, when we met, Enrique's 100% right, but there's a few more things that might help clarify. One, we're trying to decide projects for the summer. So if we go beyond this amount right now, or these projects, it's not necessarily manageable for the summer. With that said, when these projects are done over the summer, there's nothing to say that in September, October, this can't be done again and draw down on the reserve fund. And a third item, which Enrique had brought up in very good point during the facilities committee, is some things you don't want to use the reserve fund for, because we're going to get, if we do it as part of the building conditions survey, we'll get state aid on that. Whereas this, we're not getting state aid on. So you want to be careful what you use this for compared to the building condition survey work that will be in effect less costly to the community. We can still get things done, you just got to juggle it to make sure it's done most effectively. And thank you, Enrique, for bringing those things up during, you and Anthony for bringing those things up during facilities committee. Thank you.
Yeah, I also think that this list did come from many meetings of feedback from the community. So it was Anthony's, but it was feedback that was provided over time from the community, whether it be teachers or staff or parents. So, and I think we also said we wanted to be specific on what we were going to spend the money on, so that people could see at the end of the summer what we had completed, to have confidence that we could then go forward and do something else. If we could see the success and say, okay, it was worthwhile, we can go forward and do something else.
So I think this is great, and I think this is great, and for me as a new trustee, it's awesome to learn about such a unique reserve fund. For me, in my decision making, I think that I will need to know how we plan to replenish. Is that something that you do if we underspend the budget and we have leftover money next year? Determining whether we should spend $100,000 or $200,000. For me, I just need to know, that's great, let's get everything repaired, but how do we plan to replenish so that that funding is always there?
Before the $2.2 million, there was very little money. We decided that we needed the money in case, a major repair was needed. But at the same time, we were hit with Indian Point. So now all our efforts are towards reducing the tax rate. So any extra money that we get, that we can save, goes really to decrease the tax rate. So at this point, we don't have any plan just because we don't have the money. I'm always going to be very careful not to go below a certain amount just in case there's a hurricane and we need to, and something happens and we need $500,000, just to say a number, to have there to prepare anything because of an accident or natural problem. So in that sense, we are being very careful on how we use the money, and that's why we use very little. We want to be sure that this is a saving account. This is not, let's use a repair instead of the budget.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So,
Sorry. So just to clarify a point, this is above and beyond our regular facilities budget. So some of the things that Corey, you were talking about may very well be included already in Anthony's facilities budget. I don't know if the facilities team talked about that at all, because I don't know if the pothole issue was specifically brought up, but this is above and beyond.
Yeah, it was just an example that I was bringing up. It wasn't, right? So, Enrique, the big question I have then, so in the event of a disaster, I assume we have insurance, right?
Oh, of course.
Right, so what we'd have to do is cover a deductible. But then, just my little sidebar with Joe, there's also a timeliness issue too, right? In that if something needs to be repaired right away, we might not be able to wait for the adjuster to issue money.
Let me answer in two parts. Part number one is the issue of when the money will come is usually not an issue because we have, I'd say, an average balance of $10 million a day in the bank. So it happens. I just need to be sure that we have enough money for next month to pay salaries, and salaries are $4 million a month. Okay, I have $6 million that I can use right away to repair it until we get the money from the insurance. So in that sense, I might have this money, but I won't use it as a repair reserve. I'll just borrow from here until I get insurance money. So that really, we would have to be talking about $20-30 million that then we're talking probably something really bad happened here. So that's number one. And number two is anything that goes into the out of the repair reserve, again, it has to be something that the board decides to do it, and it has to be planned. But yes, it can be, for example, a thunderstorm that it's an act of God that the insurance doesn't pay. So we need to have that $500,000. It already happened 2 years ago. I don't know if you remember that there was a thunderstorm that hit the high school and blew a couple of our servers. We had to spend $20,000 that was not covered by insurance. So when I say repair reserve for emergencies, that's what I mean. I would never recommend the board to go below, let's say, $500 million, just in case. You never know.
Thank you.
Alexis, was your question answered?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. I was just going to add that it's just like with home ownership, a lot of these projects aren't very glamorous, but whether it's boiler repairs or repaving lots, by paying, it seems like a lot of money for something that's not very flashy, but those things that the boiler's not repaired now, it could be a more expensive repair down the road. So I see this as almost a good use of our reserves. I would move forward with my support of this.
If I could just jump into that point, our last building condition survey was around 2016. It identified $55 million of work, and we collectively lost our minds. It's $55 million. It's crazy. And when you go through the recommendations, they are things that people will never ever see, whether they're server closets or rewiring HVAC, so on and so forth. And so there's always that tug of war between what we will see optically versus what is really a good investment from a technical standpoint. Speaking of the servers, we didn't open school on time into high school because the HVAC unit was basically HVAC technology piece from the original part of the building is in need of we've learned is in need of upgrade. So that's a significant investment that not a lot of people will see, but we'll all experience. And you're right. It's always trying to find the balance between what will sell and trying to get a bond approved versus what will be functional and be more operational.
All right, so what I'm hearing is that the Facilities Committee is recommending that we approve a $100,000 use of the repair reserve, or maybe $106,000 if we do the middle school boiler repairs. And I think we need is that correct?
I think we agreed to the 100.
100.
Yes, we said the boiler repairs would be, we had talked with Anthony, they would be to replace tubes that are plugged and they're not there's enough capacity within the, yeah.
Okay. So the recommendation is for $100,000? So we would need 102. Okay, so we would need someone to make a motion. Yes?
I'm sorry, Clara. No, today the only thing that you have to do is instruct us to start the process.
Oh, okay.
Yes, because there's a process that might take 2, 3, or 4 weeks. I don't know the timing exactly. But then we do the hearing, and after the hearing, then we bring the proposition to the board to vote in the actual proposition. But
I was going to make a motion that we move forward with this.
Perfect.
Not that we approve the amount tonight.
Exactly.
So can I have a motion that we're going to move forward with this process? Have a second? All in favor? Unanimous. Okay, let's move forward with this. Thank you.
Thanks, Enrique.
Thank you to the Facilities Committee and to Jen for getting this whole process started. Oops, sorry, it's me again. So that brings us to our audience comments on agenda items. Do we have anybody signed up this evening?
No, we do not.
We do not. Since this has been a relatively long meeting and I see a lot of friendly faces out there, I know that people... Hold on. Well, there is somebody who wants to talk on agenda items.
On non-agenda items.
Well, I would argue that school safety is agenda item.
It should. You can speak now.
Okay,
Have you
sorry.
signed up already on the non-exec section? Okay.
You're quite early.
Fabulous. If you hadn't, I would have just had you sign in before you went to the podium.
I did sign. You did.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good evening. My name is Therese Stinks. I am the proud Canine parent of 2 children, one at Frank J., one at Blue Mountain. I'm here to express my great concern over school safety vulnerabilities in our district and ask that current and incoming board members work together with great urgency to identify what can we do better to keep our children safe in our schools. I certainly acknowledge the district's efforts around school safety and security to date, but more is needed and must be in place before our youngest and most vulnerable students report to buildings in September, which are largely unfamiliar. Now is the time to not only secure additional resources, which I know you're looking into, but to integrate further safety enhancements. Of course, my concerns come out of what happened last week. I pray to God every day that this community never, ever knows the despair that has engulfed Uvalde, Texas. And I listen, something that this administration has not historically been strong at. I have made sincere efforts to listen and to thank officers like Officer Jesse and many first responders around this community, as I see them within our own Henhud community, but also outside of it. As they talk about their efforts around school safety, it is clear Henhud is not where we need to be. We have one school resource officer for a district of nearly 15 square miles. Although Officer Jesse is clearly committed to supporting this district's safety measures, we can and we must do better. Looking at other districts, many have an SRO in every school. Why are the children and staff of Henhud not worthy of the same level of security? Tell me why. Yes, I understand there's a cost to this, but is there anything more important than the safety and the security of our schools and the lives of the children and the staff who are in them? The answer is no. We must start now. I ask that the board and Mr. Hochreiter immediately find the funds out of the approved $86 million budget to hire at least one additional SRO, with priority given to Blue Mountain and Furnace Woods due to their location and, as you've discussed, the severe lack of cell phone service out there. I will be at the next Board of Ed meeting in July to ensure that this work is being done and that it is in place for September. We cannot wait for direction. We cannot wait for incentives from the state or anyone else, as Mr. Hochreiter suggested to me when I spoke with him last week. However, I'm glad to hear that he has initiated conversations with the County Police Department since then about additional resources for our district. I implore you, as the decision makers of this district, to listen not only to our law enforcement partners and first responders, but also to your employees, the people who will be with our children. God forbid that there is an emergency. Make sure they are prepared, because Altaris is great.
Thank you. Your time
They
is
are
up.
not going to go into those buildings. Thank you.
No other speakers this evening, correct?
Yes.
All right, that brings us to our committee reports. Does Facilities Committee have anything in addition to what we've already discussed to report? Nope. We'll be hearing from the Policy Committee shortly. If there aren't any other committee reports. All right, that brings us to our policy reading. First reading, the revision of policy. So this is a revision of an existing policy. It's policy 100, which is called non-discrimination and equal opportunity. Corey, would you like to introduce the policy?
Sure, and this is a required policy. We'll start reading. Can you scroll a little bit? Okay, we're reading this. Board of Education, its officers and employees will not discriminate in its programs and activities on the
Move
basis
to waive further reading of policy 100.
Thank you.
Second. Second, great.
Yes, go ahead, questions?
No.
Oh,
I thought you needed a second.
She's seconding the motion.
Oh, you're seconding the motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Don't you need a second?
No, you just have to wait.
Oh,
Thank you.
we just, we're just not going to read it, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, so we don't have to
Sorry.
read the whole thing out loud.
Okay, I just want to make sure that.
Oh, yeah, I know what just happened.
We didn't know what was
Okay,
happening.
all right, so let me back up a minute. So when we read policies, we don't actually have to read
I
the whole
saw it,
policy
yeah.
out loud, which is a very good thing when you have a 5 or 10-page policy. This one is relatively short. It's only a page and a half. The policies are always on the agenda, obviously, for you to peruse ahead of time. We start reading the policy. Any member of the board can waive further reading, and then we can go into discussion on the policy.
Okay,
So
I just want to understand what's happening. Thank you.
Sorry about
That's
that.
okay. Good question.
All right, so does anybody have any questions or comments about this policy?
I do. So what's the origin of this policy change?
There's several things actually, Ellie. One part of it is that there's been recently some acts that have been passed by our state government. Namely, there's one called the Crown Act, which makes it so that you cannot discriminate against someone due to textured hair. It gets a little bit more specific than that, styles of hair and that kind of thing. So that needs to be added to this. If you notice underneath the very first paragraph of the revisions, it details the various protected classes to include race, which is also traits historically associated with race, such as hair texture, protective hairstyles like braids. You see that part there. And it also just details the other protected classes as well. The other thing that happened with this is it's more expansive. It's become a non-discrimination and equal opportunity policy. Before in our policies, it was only equal opportunity. So they've expanded it a little bit as well. And there's been an addition of a section on the website accessibility as well. And kind of more details as to the things that the district needs to be doing to comply.
And if you go to the very last piece, the reference part of the policy, that oftentimes gives you two things. One, the origin of how it came about, and then any changes in laws or regulations that prompted the change. So what happens is, in this case, the New York State School Boards Association, they are advised on any federal or state policy changes or laws that will impact schools' day-to-day operations. They meet with the policymakers from the feds or the state, and then they put together a model policy for school districts to amend so that we're up to date.
And from what I can see, there are a number of cross-reference policies too that we're also looking at. So in future meetings, we're going to be putting those on the agenda too. So when we see the cross-referencing, expect other changes in those.
Yeah, thank you. And so this came down from NISBA and it's gone through our lawyers and is policy.
Yeah, by and large, the vast majority of our policies are mandated from one of two organizations. The School Boards Association, because they've done legal research, or New York State Education. So very seldom would we create policies of our own accord, because when you dive into school district law, you run the risk of not following the other laws and regulations in terms of public education.
Thank you.
So this is just a first reading. We're not approving this policy this evening. You'll have a chance to look at it any further, but certainly if you have suggestions or questions or anything that you wanted to discuss tonight, we can discuss that. And then this will probably come back at to our next meeting next week, and then it'll be ready for approval at that point. Any other questions on this policy? No, thank you. All righty. Thank you very much. That brings us to our board comments and new business. I guess I have one thing. We do have an additional meeting next week. We had some conflicts with our elementary school principals. We weren't able to do our elementary reports this week, so we have scheduled an additional meeting for next week so that they have the chance to present. So there will be an extra board meeting, and hopefully everybody can attend. And that will
just be on the lookout. Our last scheduled board meeting for the year is June 15th. That is up against a conflict of other district, particularly high school events, so we may need to move that meeting up to June 14th, but we're going to make that decision by Friday. So we'll announce next Wednesday's meeting, and we'll make a decision about moving from the 15th to the 14th as well.
All right, so that brings us to our audience comments section on non-agenda items. Do anybody signed up? Any last minute? Okay. That brings us to the end of our meeting. Can I get a motion to close the meeting, please? Can I get a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Have a good evening. Our next meeting will be next Wednesday, June 8th.